Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are picking up where we left off with Eugene McMillan's autobiography, Vagabond on Victory Road.
That's right. We're diving into the sources again, and this is our second deep dive, looking at Eugene's story.
And today it's all about Chapter 2. He actually titled this one, The Downward Pull.
And this chapter, it really shifts focus, doesn't it? We move from those early childhood moments into his youth, those really crucial years.
Yeah, the formative ones. And he talks about new influences, different kinds of, well, temptations, and the start of habits that really stuck with him.
They did. For years, he says.
So our mission today really is to unpack what Eugene himself says about this time. We want to understand these forces he felt were pulling him down.
Look closely at the stories he tells, the examples.
And see how this period kind of laid the foundation for everything that happens later, which we'll definitely get into in, future deep dives. Okay, let's jump in.
Okay, so his youth. Eugene talks about his circle of friends getting bigger, older, and he's quite candid about them.
How so?
He says they were, a mix, some good, some bad, sort of mixed up is his phrase. Like all regular boys, he says. It feels pretty real, that picture of being a teenager, figuring things out.
Totally. And right around this time, something else starts looking really appealing to him. He calls them the temporary pleasures of the world.
Ah, yes. And he mentions falling in with certain lewd fellows of the baser sort.
That language is quite strong, isn't it?
It really is. It tells you a lot about his later perspective. He's basically talking about guys he saw as, bad influences, people always chasing the sweets of sin, as he puts it, and they were inviting him along.
And looking back, writing the book much later, you can feel his regret.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about shame and sorrow over the times he yielded to temptations. He says he joined them in this tireless pursuit of the pleasures of sin for a season.
For a season? That phrase really stands out. Like, maybe even then, deep down, he knew it wouldn't last.
Possibly. Or at least looking back, he sees the temporary nature of it all, and he points out how it began.
All right, not with huge things immediately.
No, initially it was little so-called harmless pleasures. But he flags this whole period as those dangerous intermediate years.
Dangerous because?
Because that's when, in his words, bad habits were acquired, which clung like leeches for several years. He draws a straight line from those seemingly small choices to these really persistent habits.
It's that classic slippery slope idea, kind of.
Exactly. Small things adding up. And he gives a very specific example of one habit that became a chief delight.
Gambling.
Yes, gambling. And the way he describes it is just so vivid, almost uncomfortably so.
Yeah. Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so he talks about sitting really uncomfortably on a cold winter's night. It's a dimly lit, smoky room. He mentions shuffling dirty gambler's cards.
Oh, doesn't sound delightful.
Not at all. And the people there, a weary-eyed circle of boys, their whole focus is on getting easy money and that momentary thrill. It's really quite a bleak picture he paints.
Yeah, and that contrasts so sharply with calling it a chief delight or a thrill at the time.
Massively. Because when he looks back, he sees them all, himself included, as a bunch of Satan-deluded dupes after the filthy lucre of this world.
Filthy lucre.
Yeah.
Wow. That's quite a shift in perspective from thrill-seeking boys to Satan-deluded dupes.
It tells you everything about how much his viewpoint changed, doesn't it? The regret, seeing the degradation in it later on.
And the description of after the gambling, it sounds just as bad.
Even worse, maybe. He talks about coming out before daybreak from what he calls their foul hole, feeling irritable and smelly.
Smelly.
Yeah, he specifically mentions their nostrils being blackened by sooty smoke from a globeless kerosene lamp. It just strips away any kind of cool factor, It's just grime and discomfort.
And it wasn't like they were all buddies afterwards either.
No, not at all. He mentions some guys gloating over their ill-won gain, but others showing bitterness, swearing, even threatening trouble. It wasn't building friendships, that's for sure. It was causing friction.
So this whole gambling story, it's a really concrete example of that downward pull he's talking about.
Exactly. It starts small, harmless pleasures, then becomes this ingrained habit, the leech, leading to these really negative outcomes, physically uncomfortable, emotionally draining, socially divisive, and ultimately, looking back, shameful. It maps out that trajectory perfectly.
Okay, so that's happening, this descent into habits like gambling. But then there's this other side to it, which seems almost contradictory.
Right. His attitude towards God, towards religion, he says it was marked by a kind of tolerant indifference.
Tolerant indifference. So not hostile, but not really engaged either.
Pretty much, which makes the next part so, well, surprising.
He kept going to Sunday school.
Regularly, yeah. He says he still went regularly to a Sunday school in town. You have to ask why if you're indifferent in doing all this other stuff.
And he actually tells us why, which is fascinating. He says, and this is a quote, "It actually seemed I could enjoy my meanness better the rest of the day if I first attended Sunday school."
Wow. So it wasn't about faith or learning.
No, he thinks it was his guilty, accusing conscience. Like going to Sunday school was some kind of, I don't know, preemptive strike against the guilt he knew he'd feel later. A way to sort of balance the books in his head before going off to be mean.
That speaks volumes about the internal conflict, doesn't it? The outward act, going to Sunday school, driven by this inner discomfort, this conscience that was still active, even while he was doing things he knew weren't right.
Yeah, that downward pull definitely had some resistance inside him. There was still that nagging voice.
And looking back, he really regrets not embracing faith earlier. He wishes he'd been a Christian during those formative years, his young, impressionable life. He saw it as a mischance for, better guidance when it really counted.
He says he knew even then that salvation was the great need of my soul.
Mm-hmm. And when he uses that word salvation, in his context, he means finding that spiritual rescue, that peace, that right relationship with God. He felt the need for it.
What, and this is the key part, isn't it?
It really is. He says flat out, no one ever told me how to obtain it.
He felt the need, but didn't have the how-to. He says he did not know the Lord as my personal indwelling Savior.
Right. And again, using his framework, that means more than just knowing about Jesus. It's about having that direct personal connection, something he believed changes you from the inside out.
And he thought he could have had that.
He did. He says he believed he could have known the Lord in this sweet relationship if someone who really knew him had taken the time to show me from the scriptures. He felt that personal guidance based on the Bible was missing.
He even mentioned specific Bible verses like John 1.12, Romans 10.9 and 10 as the kind of thing he needed someone to explain to him personally.
Yeah, verses that are often central in explaining how to receive faith. So for him, it wasn't just needing information, it was needing that connection.
He talks about the personal touch and testimony of one who really had been born again. Someone who had experienced that vital, transforming touch of Jesus.
Exactly. That term born again, meaning that spiritual new beginning, was crucial for him. He felt he needed someone who would live that transformation to actually show him the path, not just talk about it. Someone whose life was proof.
So as these habits are digging in deeper and this internal conflict is churning, things didn't get better.
No, he says clearly, things grew worse in my life. He felt a crisis was forming. He admits he woefully neglected my little testament, his copy of the New Testament.
Although he still carried it to Sunday school sometimes.
Right, and read it occasionally. And what's amazing is he says even that limited contact, having a very limited knowledge of its contents, it still served to keep my conscience tender enough to avoid many a pitfall of Satan.
Just having it around, seeing.
Yeah, he says the very sight of it would bring a measure of conviction to my heart when he was tempted. Even neglected, it still had this power, this symbolic weight for him. It reminded him, pricked his conscience.
So he's got this tension. He's somewhat concerned about my soul, aware things aren't right.
But at the same time, realizing he was growing worse instead of better. He describes this intense struggle he wanted to turn from such a life, but felt like some strange power held me in a vice-like grip.
A power beyond his own willpower.
That's how it felt to him, like he couldn't break free on his own. And then the consequences started showing up externally.
Right, he quotes that verse, Numbers 32.23, "Be sure your sin will find you out." And it did.
Yeah. His reputation got so bad that mothers in town were telling their kids, stay away from that old Macmillan boy.
Wow, that must have hit hard.
You have to imagine he reflects on it asking, was I as bad as that? I suppose so. But then he adds that crucial line, actually, I never wanted to be bad.
There's that conflict again. The actions versus the underlying desire, or maybe that original tenderness of conscience.
Exactly, and he links it to his broader view of human nature. He believed his heart, like every human heart, was inherently sinful and needing new birth, referencing John 3.3.
Meaning, in his view, we're all born with this tendency, and what's needed isn't just fixing behavior, but a fundamental inner change, that new birth.
Right. And this realization, this keen sense of shame, brought me low. His soul cried out for pardon, peace, and a better life. So he decides to make a serious effort.
This is where he tries self-reformation.
Yes. He started reading his testament regularly this time, attended Sunday school and the main worship service every Sunday. He really committed to the outward practices.
Doubling down on the religious activity.
Exactly. And for a little while, it seemed to work. Sinful habits were broken off, he says. Self-reformation had begun. And importantly, it made me feel good.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
There is a big one, he says, but alas, I had no abiding peace in my heart. Something was lacking.
So the external changes felt good temporarily, but didn't touch that deeper need for lasting, abiding peace.
Precisely. The surface was cleaned up, but the core issue, that inner lack, remained. And because that foundation wasn't solid?
It didn't last.
No. After just a few months, he says, I slipped back again into the old way of living. And here's the kicker, though my heart cried out against it.
So even as he slipped back, his conscience was still fighting it. But the willpower, the self-reformation effort, just wasn't strong enough against that vice-like grip.
Exactly. And this failure, this whole cycle, taught him some profound lessons from his perspective.
What were they?
He learned the emptiness of mere religion, just going through the motions without that inner reality. He learned the folly of just turning over a new leaf, that simple resolutions often aren't enough, and the hopelessness of self-reformation. He came to believe in the utter impossibility of saving oneself by his own efforts in any manner whatsoever. Those are really strong conclusions.
He basically decided that willpower and religious effort alone couldn't fix the core problem or break that downward pull. He needed something else entirely.
That's the conclusion he drew from his own experience. He even makes this observation, maybe looking around at others too, that the so-called religious life is often on the downward course.
How does he explain that?
He quotes Ephesians 2:2 about following the course of this world, led by the prince of the power of the air. It seems he's saying that just adopting external religious forms or following what's spiritually popular, if it lacks that genuine internal transformation he was missing, doesn't actually counter the downward spiritual trend. From his viewpoint, it could even be part of it.
So chapter 2 really takes us on quite a journey. From those first temptations, forming bad habits,
Through that intense internal battle with his conscience.
to this really determined attempt at self-improvement through religion, only to find it, well, lacking, unsustainable.
He learns the hard way, through his own failure, that just trying harder or being outwardly religious wasn't enough to overcome that vice-like grip or bring him the deep, lasting peace he craved.
And you know, that struggle of the power of habits, the nagging conscience, the frustration of trying to change and failing, the limits of just trying harder or being religious without something deeper that resonates, doesn't it? It feels like a very human experience, whatever your own background.
Absolutely. We've all likely felt stuck or tried to turn over a new leaf and found it incredibly difficult.
So this chapter leaves Eugene kind of hitting rock bottom in terms of his own efforts. He knows what he needs, that peace, that freedom, but his own attempts have failed. He realizes he needs something more, something he can't provide himself.
It definitely sets the stage powerfully for whatever comes next in his story. He's identified the problem, felt its weight, tried his own solutions, and found them wanting.
Yeah. He discovered self-reformation didn't bring abiding peace, which leaves us, and maybe you listening, with a pretty big question to think about. If Eugene's own efforts, his willpower, his religious activities weren't enough to overcome that downward pull and find real peace, what is? What does provide that kind of lasting change? Is it something we find inside ourselves, or does it have to come from somewhere else?
Something to definitely chew on until our next deep dive into Eugene McMillan's story.